Welcome to the show, Make It Plain, the Eric, Key, and Cameron Show. On today's show, let's talk about spiritual warfare. Should be interesting. Stay tuned. This podcast is dedicated to addressing various topics from a biblical perspective, coupled with practical solutions for daily application. In essence, we want to take the Bible, which is relevant for all that we need in this life and the one to come, 2 Peter 1:3, and just make it plain as God told the prophet Habakkuk in Habakkuk 2:2. Our contact information for those of you who would like to contact us, we always appreciate that. We respond to every viewer. So if you would like to contact us, reach out to us, submit questions, comments, let us know where you disagree. Let us know where you agree, what you like, what you don't like. We'll accept it all. But to contact us, our email address is makeitplain, HAB22 @gmail.com. The HAB22 is in Habakkuk 2:2. So today's topic, we're going to be discussing spiritual warfare. And this is a good one. I don't know that I've ever really just address the topic spiritual. I've always talked about the armor of God. Like, I think we've always done that. But just this idea of spiritual warfare, because we did an episode on, well, we did two previous episodes. One was on, I think this was in season 1, maybe. The seasons run together, but demonic possession. And we also did miracles. And I think those two things lend to maybe this misunderstanding of spiritual warfare, because you have the word spiritual and then you have the word warfare. So obviously you're talking about war, it seems to make sense that you'd be talking about like spiritual angels, demons, and this whole warfare that's happening in the eternal realm. But we are, or are we? Are we engaging in spiritual warfare? Is spiritual warfare a biblical topic?
You take it? You take. You should. I think it's interesting the way a lot of the epistles in the New Testament are written. When you look at Ephesians 6, 10 through 18, the language that Paul uses there is of the nature and of the fact that
battle ready
warfare exists, and right. So we should be ready. But also in 2 Timothy 2, he told Timothy to endure hardness as a good soldier. Right. Of Jesus Christ. So you start thinking about these terms and these phrases, they have to have some type of implication of some type of struggle, battle between right and wrong, righteousness and unrighteousness, these things that Christians struggle with. So I would absolutely agree that the New Testament speaks of a warfare that
because as an extension to verse number 4, 2 Timothy 3 is, I believe, what you quoted. Paul, as an extension, will say, "No man that warreth."
Absolutely.
So he actually does use the word war there.
Entangleth.
Yeah, entangle himself in affairs of this life.
Right. So,
if you're on a battlefield and you're in the army, in the military, you're in war, and you got bullets shooting at you, I would imagine that you're probably not thinking, did my wife pay the mortgage this month? You probably, it's probably not what's going through your mind. And I've never been. I was just imagining.
It's the craziest thing. As we're talking about warfare and fighting, that picture. There's a meme, and you may have seen what this guy, he's picking his hair. And the guy says, "They fighting out there. They squabbling out there." Have you seen that?
I have not, but I can picture
it. It's the funniest thing, man. It's like, yeah, they squabbling out there. And you think about that.
But you have to have, like, you almost have to have some cultural undertones to understand it, because I can see it. And that's why it's so funny, because I obviously understand.
And so for the Christian, man, it's like, man, we fight out here.
Yeah, it's for real.
It's a real battle.
Yeah, no, it's for real out there. And but yeah. Okay.
It's when I think of spiritual warfare, and I don't know the mindset that the reader or the person who submitted the question had with it. Mm-hmm. But you think about all the things as we've alluded to already, Ephesians 6, what's going on in this world, the obstacles that Christians have to go through. Not all of them are going to be something of a physical nature. You know,
Yeah.
everybody probably, there are people who deal with racism. There are people who are struggling with sin. And a lot of times we put these things and we'll just say, well, the devil, is busy. Well, it is true that Satan he is trying to orchestrate these things. And sometimes people let the old Flip Wilson additive, the devil made me do it.
Yeah.
Geraldine. It gets them all caught up. So we are truly fighting a war against those that are in the powers that be, whether it's those who make rules, they're bringing things in that are not godly, and then the things that we see that are being pushed upon us.
Right.
Right now, and again, this is not an attack on anybody, but it seems like everything now is geared towards making our children have a confusion over their identity. You even from the Disney movies to this to that, there's some evil. There is the warfare that's going on. I can speak only for where we live at in this area. Kids now are identifying more as an opposite sex than what their assigned sex was that God gave them at birth. Right. So that's something of a spiritual warfare that we're fighting, that we have to stand up for all those things. And of course, we're going to go into 6:10 and 8:3.
And it's not without compassion. I want to make sure that people understand that we laugh and we joke, but we never do so in a flippant or unloving or uncompassionate way that would ridicule what people are actually experiencing. We've never done that.
And then, you mentioned like gender identity, and because as we kind of bring all this stuff together, that warfare that does exist, that we know exists, is so many layers to like that one particular, just that aspect. Not only is it gender identity, but we're talking about, even in that particular realm, this whole notion that people don't even know what they are. Yeah. That's like,
so if we're talking about spiritual warfare, and I want to say, because when Paul wrote that to Ephesus, he wrote it to Christians. When Paul wrote it to Timothy, he wrote it to a Christian
in Ephesus,
who was preaching at Ephesus at the time. When Paul would talk about for our weapons are not carnal, but they're spiritual. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, he wrote that to Christians. When Peter said your adversary, the devil, he wrote that to Christians.
Absolutely.
So a lot of the stuff we're talking about, like as far as gender fluidity and, we used to be gender dysphoria, but those things seem to tend to, I know there are members in the church and there are families in the church who are dealing with it, but those are not typically things that we're dealing with in-house, right? Here's a question I'm asking, but there's still spiritual warfare, like, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is, I guess the question I want to ask is, if spiritual warfare is happening and if the idea is that it's occurring at a level that the Geraldine, the devil made me do it, does that excuse, or in people's minds, does that kind of absolve them of their responsibility in this warfare? Like, well, the devil is doing it. There's forces out beyond my control. Does that make sense?
Well, then you think about the passages that warn against and also motivate us in certain areas. Like, for example, 2 Corinthians 5:10.
Yeah.
Paul said, the things, for all of us have to give an account of things that we've done in this body, whether they be good or bad, that we've done. So you can't shift that blame on anyone or anything else. Obviously, we all can be influenced, but it's still, James 1:13-16, that temptation and that making that decision, that fateful decision is still up to us. And we're going to be held accountable for that.
Every church, every one of the 7 in Western Asia, I know thy works. I know thy works. Every one of them.
Yeah. When you think about also, I just picked the ideal of the gender part, but that spiritual, it can be anything.
Yeah.
I asked somebody a question one time, and I think I kind of rubbed them the wrong way when I gave the answer, but I should say I made a statement. I said that there are Christians who probably are struggling with alcoholism, drug addiction, homosexuality. Yeah.
There are. There's not probably.
And somebody will say, well, you can't say that they're a Christian if they're doing that. That's the spiritual warfare that's going, like, because you obey the gospel, that's now you really have to submit. You have to be totally 100% belong to God. But then there are still urges in this world. There are still fleshly things. And the person they told me I wasn't much of a gospel preacher for saying that this person was quote unquote struggling with this and that they could not be a Christian if they did that. I said, sin is sin. There is a spiritual warfare. Like every day we have a choice. We're married. Can we go and sleep with somebody? There's an opportunity for us to do that, but we don't because we're fighting this war. We know.
So if a Christian lies, they cease to be a Christian.
I asked the same question.
So the passage. Has anybody ever read 1st and 2nd Corinthians? Like Paul wrote that to Christians. No, we're not saying sin is okay or living an unrighteous life, but to stick our heads in the sand and pretend that Christians don't struggle with things, that's just dishonest.
One of the most problematic congregations that Paul dealt with was the Church of Corinth.
Yeah.
Like I always say, and if you read the letters, there's a difference in approach between Paul's writing to the church at Philippi and the church at Corinth.
Oh, Philippi's a love letter.
Absolutely.
1 Corinthians is a correction letter.
Absolutely. So it's like you got to be able to make that distinction and also be honest and saying and identifying Christians do experience things that, as Peter says, war against the soul. 1 Peter 2:11. Like
right.
It's the New Testament is not. The New Testament does not hide these things.
And an inspired apostle wrote Romans 7.
Absolutely.
And
an inspired apostle rebuked another one to his face because he was to be blamed. Galatians chapter 2.
And an inspired apostle wrote 1 John. If we sin, we have an advocate
with the Father.
If we, including himself.
If we.
It's
interesting.
It's the lack of. I like what y'all said about the accountability. We have to have accountability. You can't just say, "Man, Satan's so good. He just he got me. I just fell down." We can never say that. But that's why he encourages us in Ephesians 6:10 through 18 how to stand tall.
Because we actually have passages to the contrary of that. That be sober, be vigilant for your adversary, the devil. We have an entire chapter, first 11 verses, Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 4.
How he overcame.
Last week, man, on the news, one of the things they kept saying in lieu of going into the 4th of July holiday was there was so many shark sightings on various beaches. So this is on the news nationally, globally. So it's like you get to the beach and there's these warnings, but this stuff is on the news. So my point is that how is it that everybody's getting these warnings that, man, if you potentially go to the beach, man, it's going to be sharks. And it's like, but people still go. like there was
still get in.
Like there was no warning prior to. So what the New Testament does on many occasions, it warns us.
Right.
It warns us. It shows us what will happen in the event that we don't heed the warning.
Well, the passage that is the staple of our show, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, according as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who has called us glory and virtue, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises.
Why?
That by these we might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in this world through lust.
Amen.
It exists.
It's there.
It exists. And great point, man.
Well, and then let's add to that. They
deal with it.
On the day of Pentecost, Peter said, save yourselves from this untoward generation. Paul says in Philippians 2:14, this crooked and perverse nation. So, what we are saying is that the world wherein we live is a world that is not conducive.
Oh, for sure.
To godliness or to the Christian lifestyle.
Jesus said they're not of this world. Right. They're in it. They're not of it.
That's why the song we sing, "This world is not my home." I have a different outlook on certain things when it comes to. I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna word it the right way. Please correct me if I say it wrong. Many times I've been told by people who look like me, not only just people in the world, but also Christians, where the man got me down. To this day, I still don't know who the man is. And people like, that's the devil. The man got his foot on my neck, and it's the folks that's in the powers that be.
Are they talking about systemic? Like, I guess they would be talking about kind of these systemic, but
yeah.
And I don't say that to make fun of anybody who may feel a certain way because certain experiences have happened. But there is a point where there are evil people in our government. There are evil people who make rules. But the thing we have to do is continue to lean on God so that we're able to get through those things.
Yeah.
Now, I am able to do more, and I'm able to go forward because I understand who I am and whose I am.
Right.
I think Garner mentioned earlier, number one, we know Ecclesiastes 1:9-10, there's nothing new under the sun. But Garner mentioned earlier, it's like, man, when you look at the New Testament, Paul and the churches in the New Testament, man, they were in subjection to Rome.
One of the worst governments that have ever graced.
I mean, even history attests to that.
Right.
So it's like the New Testament and Christianity, kind of evolved out of this time period where
grew.
Yeah, and grew, right. Out of this element in this time period where everything was against Christianity, man.
Yeah. Enemy of the state. Had become an enemy of the state to the point that it was persecuted to death by the Roman government, had to go underground. I mean, it exists. I mean, we know this. And so spiritual warfare really would be probably biblically, we're talking about this battle, and you've got righteousness and unrighteousness. You've got morality, immorality. You've got light and dark. Even John would say, John chapter 1, speaking of the incarnate Christ, who comes in the flesh, and he says, the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not.
Man,
that is
you got
that is the yin and yang, so to speak. Darkness does not comprehend light, and this world is dark.
And you got the juxtaposition of works of the flesh
and
versus the fruit of the spirit.
Right.
So
There's
it's
always that two ways.
Absolutely.
Straight way, the straight narrow
gate.
Way, broad and wide way.
Absolutely.
There's only the two.
And what's implied in all of those situations is God made us as free, moral, volitional creatures with the capacity and the ability to choose.
Yeah. And that's so when we're talking about spiritual warfare, we are talking about these things that war against the soul, these things that lend themselves to the flesh, these things that will cause us to struggle with righteousness and, to accept and participate in unrighteousness rather than righteousness. These things that lure and tempt the flesh, because the flesh is a real thing. And we're living in it and operating in it. That's why I'm so glad it won't go to heaven.
Oh, yes.
I think about, so you think about this, like Paul says in Colossians, 3:5 about being aware of covetousness, which is idolatry. And then you turn around and you look at the rich young ruler.
Mm-hmm.
He his things, his material possessions were his God.
Yeah. And
he struggled with parting with them to the degree he was willing to
turn his back on
eternal life.
Eternity.
Man, that's a real
Judas.
Thing.
Judas was out just
that's
exactly who I
was. Man walked and talked with Jesus for 3.5 years.
Absolutely.
Still turned his back on the Lord.
So is it safe to say that it's the mindset we possess? So that's why how we're going to handle the spiritual warfare. Because again, how does he attack? Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. I have to process all these things. So I love the fact when we look at Paul, Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8, think on these things. Mm-hmm. So it's how you engage in being a good Christian soldier is going to be how you take in this word and how you go through the spiritual warfare. How do you fight this battle? One
of my absolute favorite passages to quote is because I think it encompasses all of Christianity in like 2 verses, man. Romans 12, 1 and 2. Right? It is such a staple passage. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies he covers all of Christianity, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, which is your logikos latreia, which is your reasonable logical worship. Yep. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, perfect. Man, if you ask me to give you 2 passages that define Christianity, it would be Romans 12:1 and 2.
Absolutely.
It would be Romans 12:1 and 2. He covers everything from the body to the spirit to the mind,
right,
to the unrighteousness, to righteousness, to the world, to what the church should be doing. He covers everything in those two passages.
And we know practically for Romans 12, man, if you can ever train and condition the mind, you can change the behavior.
But that's always the progression, though.
Absolutely.
Because if you try to change someone on the surface level, it's going to be superficial at best. It's not until you change when you change the inside. Wasn't the disciples blamed for that with eating with unwashed hands?
Yeah.
Man, Jesus made that point. He says it's not what enters, it's what comes out.
Absolutely.
You change the inside, you change the outside.
Absolutely.
Change the inside, you change the
and
outside.
then we will also be remiss if we didn't keep mentioning about, the 3 ways you were tempted. Well,
yeah.
For our viewing audience, you got to remember, man, Matthew 4:1-11.
Yeah.
Jesus was tempted.
Let's go there. Let's go ahead and go there.
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and go there. So because now we'll talk about how to engage. So I think we've defined spiritual warfare. We've seen it. We've looked at it. How do we engage it? Number one, I believe the way we engage is number one, know, Cam, you made reference to this earlier. You got to know that there's a war. Like you got to know that it's going on. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 and following. 10 through 18. Like you have to be able to put on the armor of God. Understand that there is a war happening. Know that the devil is shooting arrows. Like he's using us as a target. Now he's not pulling the strings. He's not making us do anything, but he sets the stage, right? He presents opportunities. He his influence is seen through his ministers. And that's what Paul said. Don't be surprised. He has his ministers. They transform to angels of light. Don't be surprised if, this is what he does. He's a deceiver. He's a liar. He has been from the beginning. John chapter 8, when Jesus is having this conversation with the Jews, they were of their father, the devil. The lust of their father they would do, 8:44. And so and
even Paul says he's the God of this world, 2 Corinthians 4:4.
God of this world.
John
Prince of the power of the air,
right.
Ephesians chapter 2.
And John says the whole world lieth
in
in wickedness, 1 John 5:19. So
Yeah.
you're thinking about, man, this is like total consummation. Like,
Man, this is this dude's area.
Yeah.
Like this is his battleground.
This his home turf.
Yes. The home field advantage. Home court advantage he has. So number one, when we're engaging for our viewing audience, when we're engaging in this spiritual warfare, number one, know that it's happening, but don't discount it. Don't act as if it's not happening. And it's coming from spiritual weakness in high places. Key, you made reference to this earlier. We're talking about governmental laws, legislation, the highest seats in the lands that are influencing the lives of their residents.
So just sidebar, would it be safe to say, with that thought in mind, why do we get so caught up and twisted up with politicians and politics when, to some degree, man, they are the problem?
Yeah, we don't want to be canceled, bro. But you are correct.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like
politics has divided.
Paul said it came from high places.
High places.
Yeah. And we can't discount that.
And we saw it with Paul.
Yes.
But Paul, man, when Paul went on his trial in Acts 21 and through 28, when Paul is now on religious and civil trials that happened in those chapters.
Yes.
High places. Paul can say it because he physically experienced it.
Yeah, he knows.
You know what I'm saying?
He's been Paul, like, I've been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
Hey,
man,
I always say, when you read Acts 24 and 25, when he was before Felix,
right?
If you think about it comically, Felix sent for Paul in verse 24.
Thought he was going to hear something.
But when he didn't hear what he wanted to hear, he told Paul to get out of his face.
Get out of here. And he preached that 3-point sermon.
Righteousness,
temperance, and the judgment to come.
Felix.
So for my viewing audience, when you wonder why Garner preaches 3-point sermons, I got him from Paul. Yeah. So, but for number one, know that there is a war. Ephesians 6:10 and following. Number two, know your responsibility in this war. Cam, you hit on it earlier. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 3 and 4. Be good soldiers of Jesus Christ. Like you came into the kingdom you came into a war. Like you enlisted in the military when you became Christian. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you enlisted in God's military. Like, this is not time to sit on do nothings and do nothing. You have to understand that you are engaged in a spiritual battle and your soul is the target.
Man, can you imagine how that would look like if like there was a battle, like a war, and we had drone footage of some soldiers on the field just chilling out.
Just hanging out.
On the battlefield.
Yeah.
Gun tucked to the side.
Yeah, just off somewhere.
They got their
not prepared at all.
Yeah. And somebody said, man, you know, they fighting over there. Like, who?
Well, they don't fight.
You know, I tell them all the time. I just told them that when I finished this gospel meeting this week, a lot of the little songs that we sing, that when you just said that, I kept thinking about the song, The Lord's Army.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of time we sing it in the Pew Packers classes,
right,
with the younger kids or VBSs. We need to be realizing that as the adults who are in the church. I'm in the Lord's Army. Yeah. You know, I need to be active. I need to know these things that we're talking about in Ephesians chapter 6.
I'm a hard fighting soldier. On the battlefield.
But you remember when Moses and Joshua came down off the mountain?
Mm-hmm.
Exodus 32?
Yes.
The question was asked, who is on the Lord's side?
That's what we need to know.
Yeah, we got to figure that out.
Yeah, we need to know that. Yeah. Who's on the Lord's side? Number 3, know who the enemy is. We've made reference to that. 1 Peter 5:8, the devil is the enemy. Peter said, be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Know his purpose. John 10:10. Steal, kill, destroy. That's his entire purpose. He wants to steal your salvation. He wants to destroy your relationship with God, steal your salvation, kill your soul, destroy your relationship with God. That's what he wants to do. Number 5, know his weapons. I think both of y'all hit on this. 1 John 2:15 through 17, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. Know what's at stake. James 1:13 through 15, let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God. God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man, but every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust and enticed. And lust, when it hath conceived, bringeth forth sin. Sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. That's a conclusion. That's what he wins. If he wins, eternal death and separation from God is the conclusion. And finally, know how to combat him. We've made reference to this. Matthew 4, using the word of God. Luke 4, 3 times Jesus said, it is written. Right? In Romans 8:31, if God be for us,
who can be against us?
Know how to combat the devil.
Could we also add to Jesus' temptation in Matthew 4, Psalm 119:11?
Oh, sure.
Thy word have I hid
in my heart that I might not sin against
That's what Jesus did.
Absolutely. So, well, our time is spent. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you'd like to reach out to us and submit questions or comments regarding the show, we'd love to address those, even use those to drive our show content. Our email address is makeitplain, hab22@gmail.com. May God bless you and keep you as you seek to conform your will to his.